Welcome to the OKD Working Group meeting for May 23rd of the year 2023. Let's gaze at the agenda for a few seconds. Let us know if there's anything that is missing or that you'd like to move around or remove, as the case may be. Take a couple seconds for that. All right, everyone good on the agenda? All right, I see a lot of thumbs up, nodding heads. Then let's jump into it. OKD release and CI/CD updates. Luigi, I think you're the only one here, so take it away.
Yeah. So yeah, we had a discussion early on and with our engineering manager. So we are looking at building 4.14 for the OKD.next version and 4.13 for our stable version because of well, basically we're in the throes of having 4.13 G8. So that was our thinking anyway. I still have to just confirm with Christian. I've been away on PTO, so but that was the general thinking.
Okay, and anything? Yeah, Neil, did you have a question or just saying?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions actually. The first is, so with OKD 4.13 coming down the pipeline, so I saw with the OpenShift 4.13 talk that we are going to have cgroup v2 by default and crun as available as a non-default GA for whatever that means. That makes me think that we actually should probably go a step further. Okay, in OKD, can we actually like kind of hit a home run here and like do crun by default for at the very minimum new OKD deployments, like we did for cgroup v2 several releases back? I think it's like at least a year or so ago that we did that, because Fedora defaults to it and we wanted to make sure that everything worked with that. I would like us to be doing all the cool shit first, and I want us to be able to, and I think that's an avenue for us to provide value to the OCP team as well. And yeah, so that's kind of like where my head is on this. Is like there's a couple of things that were announced with OpenShift 4.13 that are like either preview or non-default GA, which is a weird state I've never heard of before. And we should just do those things by default out of the box for OKD. Can we do that?
Well, technically, if at a technical level, if we can, it would just involve obviously the working group taking a vote to say, yeah, let's do this. What is the general sense? First let me ask Luigi, are you from a technical perspective, what do you think?
Yeah. So just on the crun thing, I have been playing around with it, especially for WASM, for running WASM binaries in crun, because you can actually compile crun with WASM enabled. So we were experimenting with that. So I'm with Neil here. I would really like to see that. Only because it's
very cool, right? Like we could do so many cool things with it.
Yeah. And
also cutting our memory usage by 40% would be great. Like that's a big deal. That's a lot.
Absolutely. And it is. I mean, based on C, it's going to run much faster. And so these are the experiments that we should be playing with. So I don't know. Should we try and look at it for shift week? And I mean, I know this is a very Red Hat specific thing, so we might exclude a lot of the community folk, but it could be maybe something to pilot and then drive forward. I don't know. I'm just as a suggestion.
I don't know what shift week is. So
okay. So basically what happens is so in the OpenShift larger community, all the devs have a week where we can experiment. complete week to do whatever you want to do on related to OpenShift. That's why they call it Shift Week. So what happened last year, we played around with the pipelines. We built a couple of pipelines and that type of thing. But maybe we could do that and pilot, like, for example, I mean, I'm focusing on C-Run, but all the other stuff that you've mentioned, Neil, we could maybe list and say, okay, let's see how far we can go.
Yeah.
So I'm very for the idea, but I mean, what this would probably mean is opening a lot of bugs. So I mean, that would be the point, really, is, you know, just identifying exactly what would break.
Yeah, and that's like part of the motivation here is because introducing making a tri-state for GA not on and default not implies that somebody is not confident about the tech that we have, and I don't share in that same feeling, but the only way to prove it is to do it, and so we should.
This is also something that by the way, I'm Jeremy Peterson. I'm a staff engineer.
Oh, hi.
On the OpenShift team. I've been asked to liaison with this group on behalf of the staff engineers. The staff engineers have asked us explicitly to do this, what you're asking. So it's a good idea.
Yay!
My approval.
Looks like we're getting a consensus here.
Let me just make one point. The reason why it may not be default is if no one's been using it and you set it to default, and maybe they just don't want to break anyone's environment by then bringing this in and it changing functionality. It may not be that they don't have confidence in it. They just don't want to break people because they're not already using it.
So the reason, so I thought of that, Amy, I was just a little skeptical of the argument because they GA'd it. Just not by.
Yeah, but we're having those discussions with turning on FIPS by default.
Wait, what?
So, OpenStack.
Okay, you're about to give me a heart attack. FIPS and OpenShift is like.
But it's kind of the same conversation. If we suddenly have it as default and people are forced to use it, will it break people's environment?
Sure. Yeah.
But is this not what our sort of pipelines and SCOS is all about? That we can create a shadow release that has this on by default, and we want people to play with it, but it's then the consumer's choice on whether they want the version with it on by default, or they want to be a little bit safer and have the version with it off by default. But I thought that was the reason we had this pipeline in the open, so right. We can actually do these things a lot easier than needing someone in Red Hat to do the magic incantations with the PROW system to create a release.
I would argue that probably the Red Hatters don't necessarily know the incantations for the PROW system either, because like the amount of interesting questions I see go on when people talk about PROW makes me think that is less understood than people think it is. But no, like my thought process around this is that if there was a reason for someone to think that it might break something because it is new and maybe different, maybe they were burned by something else. Like I know that the Podman CNI change to Netavark broke a ton of container workloads, and I know that spooked a bunch of people around that. I don't consider the change of run C to C run to be in the same class of potential breakage, but the only way to really demonstrate that is to do it and prove it. And I think that OKD is the place that we should be doing that sort of thing. I honestly didn't know we weren't using C-Run already. I thought we had actually switched to C-Run when we went to C Groups V2 last year. And the finding out that we hadn't was a surprise. You can say something now, Jamie. I know you've opened your mouth like twice now. And not said it.
I want to make sure other people can say what they want to say before I say anything. So we've had a discussion that sort of touched on the pluses and the minuses, benefits and downsides. Can we maybe formulate a async discussion in the discussion section about benefits and downsides? And then from there, if the group decides, yes, this is where we want to go, then start formulating a plan for how we promote it, how we make, how the technical change comes about, how we promote it, and whatnot. Because my sense is that the general tenor is that we're a yes on this, but it would be good to actually document this in a discussion. So if I start a discussion item in the working group repo, can folks chime in there with your thoughts and ideas so that we have like a record of conversation and then can execute a plan based on that discussion? Does that sound good?
Sure. I mean, we have this record here, but if you want more records, I'm fine with
Well,
that.
but ultimately we're going to want to actually write out a plan and start delegating
Sure.
tasks. And
Yeah,
whatnot.
yeah. That's
you know what
fair.
I mean? Because if we're going to do this, we don't want to do it half-assed.
We want to do it full
that right. We don't want to do something that has the potential for breakage, not providing a way for people to get back out of it, not providing documentation about the fact that there is this change. There's a lot of stuff that we need to do and this is the direction I think the group has wanted to go for a long time with OKD in general. But for our first time doing this, like really,
we need to establish procedures for being able to
procedure and right,
yeah.
Exactly. So
yeah,
okay,
no, I totally get it. Like, go ahead and make a discussion thing and add a link to the agenda, and then we'll throw some async comments and stuff in there. My general feeling is that I think we should just do it for everything and then just see what happens going from there. Because I suspect that with the data that we can have on doing this, it will make it a lot easier for this technology to show up sooner across the entire OpenShift portfolio. And actually could also benefit upstream Kubernetes folks too, because I don't think anyone in upstream Kubernetes has seriously thought about their recommendations of how the container interface, the container runtime interface stack is structured in God knows how long. And so it would be very useful, I think, for us to leverage our experience here to provide some useful information to even just vanilla Kubernetes folks upstream, because I think that is definitely something we can provide value to them as well.
Yeah, I mean,
I think you're right. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Jeremy.
If we want, one of the visions for OKD that's been communicated to me is for OKD to be an upstream of OpenShift. Right now, the upstream of OpenShift is Kubernetes. If OKD were really to become the upstream of OpenShift, that would imply that Kubernetes would be the upstream of OKD, and OKD would be the upstream of OpenShift, meaning that all of the features of Kubernetes would be, demoed and, exercised in OKD first. And so we'd be getting all that experience in OKD first, and, experiencing all that pain and, before the OpenShift people do. This is obviously a massive change to the way things are done right now, but maybe it's worthwhile. Obviously,
we wanted to do it since the beginning. Most of the reason we haven't done it before was because the infrastructure wasn't in place, and we really just for a long time there was just no real appetite to getting that built out. And it finally started happening what mid last year, Jamie, and we're starting to be in a position where we can do this for the first time. And honestly, I think C-Run's going to be a great proving ground for this, because I actually expect nothing bad to happen. And that means that if something bad happens, it'll probably be very mild and it'll be resolvable. And we can use it as a way to qualify a process that we do have for doing this further down the road with much more devastating or much more invasive features, because this is not going to be the end of the road. There's way more stuff that's going to go on in the future. things around, I don't know if anyone saw what happened at Red Hat Summit today, but we got a whole bunch of new things coming out that are OpenShift centric, and some of those are going to trickle into OKD, and we got to think about how we want to have those part of the story too. And then of course there's building relationships with upstream Kubernetes so that we can be a valuable partner there too. Like I've done a little bit of work in upstream Kubernetes project around the release special interest group, but there's also other things that we probably want to engage in and provide, provide value to the communities that make the OpenShift product successful.
Okay, so I'm going to be sort of a little bit of a naysayer here. I just think we have to be very careful. We are a small community, and at the minute we don't actually have a separate code base. We build off the OpenShift code base. So what you're talking about here is quite a substantial change, and it's going to require that all the internal OpenShift people that currently contribute things are going to have to come and contribute into OKD to get something into OCP potentially. So I think there's quite, you are talking about a sort of fairly major shift here that we can't just slide in by accident. There's going to be quite a lot of governance conversation, organization conversation, and us as a community, I think it will bring a big change onto us, because we'll now have a sudden flood of contributors want to contribute to our code base, which we actually don't have at the minute. So I think there is quite a lot of change here. I think it's the right direction. I think for a long time, OKD's been this thing that sits on the side that people aren't really sure what it is. So I think it is a great direction, but I just don't want us to underestimate the size or the implication of the change we're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, it's by no means there's by no means a consensus that it's even the right direction, because I mean it's a downstream right now. But I think by proving out that we can get value by having people try out features like CRUN, and demonstrating that
there is a community place to do this stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Like the problem right now that OpenShift has, to put it bluntly, is they don't have anywhere to try anything except for in prod, in the product. And that's not a great place to be when you want to do bigger shifts, pardon the pun. Like and in the community space, like we're generally much more enthusiastic and interested in the development of the stack that we want to rely on. And I think that it is worth that to empower and enable people to be able to be part of that development. And CRUN is a very, very, like switching to CRUN by default from a technical perspective is a very small change. I mean, there are bigger implications for sure, but it's a very small change that we can do to see how this can work out.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, testing of riskier configurations has to happen somewhere. So it makes sense for groups and individuals and entities which are more comfortable with those configurations to be empowered to do so. So that's what this exists for, right?
We've already been accidentally doing it for a couple of years now because we were forced to turn on C Group v2 for OKD when Fedora did, because that's like we had to be able to do that. So we've been running in C Group v2 for a long time, and that's why I was a little surprised that we weren't even doing CRUN. It's like, oh, okay, so we're doing C Group v2 with run C. That was news.
So is a consequence of this then we need to get the Fedora release onto the pipeline workflow.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Because at the minute, the SCOS is the pipeline, the Fedora, the FCOS is still the PROW system that I think Vadim and Christian are about the only ones that really understand how to cut a release from what PROW does and how to actually pull it all together to actually make a release.
Yeah, we probably do need to pull FCOS out of that and into our loop, because I mean, frankly, we've had problems with the FCOS OKD integration, and I kind of lay the feet at the fact that none of us actually understand what the hell's going on when they get put together. And without being able to influence and improve that, I don't know how that was supposed to get better.
Well, and it was also, you know, for a time I was attending the FCOS working group meetings, and their intent, their direction is to not be tied to a particular Kubernetes or any type of container orchestration system, and for people to be able to run containers individually, for people to be able to use Kubernetes, for people to be able to use whatever, like, and not be tied to a particular, not be opinionated basically in that regard. And so for Fedora Core OS, that was great, but for us, not so great, because it's not as maybe tightly bound as we might want it to be, right? Right, it's, yeah. So, okay, it sounds like we have two different things, or three different things going on here. Number one, I'll start a thread for this particular item for C-Run. Number two, start a discussion about, in general, some of the things that have been coming out of OCP land that we would like to follow that overall process of turning on now and being forerunners. So like get a list going of some of those things. And then the third thing is what Jeremy is referencing, is this notion of truly becoming an upstream and starting to talk about what would that really mean to the community, right? And so I see three different discussions that we can start having. Is that about the feel of the room right now?
Is there a fourth one about FCOS? Because I see that almost as a prerequisite of the community being able to do the C-Run. Because if we can't build a release, we can't really do the work to integrate and change the runtime.
That's a good, you know, and I haven't kept up with where FCOS is with that. So, all right, I'll put that as a to-do item for myself to go and find that out, because I know that a lot of our FCOS folks are at Summit and or on PTOs. So,
Luigi, I guess we could do the C-Run with SCOS, because
yeah, we could give it a go.
There now.
Yeah, we can
access
access the repo, access the repo, build it, and then implement it. It's a change in the config.
Yeah, and it will be the same for FCOS as well, because C-Run has been preloaded on FCOS for a long time.
My point is, though, we can't create a release binary. No one knows how to create a release binary for FCOS.
We can't create a release binary, but I'm saying that effectively that config change will work for both. And also, the existing binaries might actually already have all the stuff set up. We just need to flip the flag, and then future builds will have it too.
Yeah.
So,
all right.
Yeah.
So let's get those three. I'll create three discussion items where we can start having an asynchronous discussion and sort of document, you know, in those three areas, how to move forward. Does anyone else have anything that they want to add to those three topics before we move on? I want to make sure that we have enough time for the other things that we have on the agenda. Good. All right, cool. Let's move on now to let's see, next up is FCOS updates, which we don't have either of them here. SCOS updates, I don't know if you have anything Luigi, and
No, I
that
don't.
you're
I
aware of?
haven't been in touch with Christian as I've been away.
Okay.
So yeah, I can't give you anything that's concrete. Yeah.
Okay. Next up, community development updates. Brian.
Okay, so last week we had our first of the new format meetings, where we actually use this time in the community one to actually do some work. So we actually reviewed the homepage. I've got to actually release the work that we did, and we actually had like a joint working session to actually go in, change the content on the homepage. I think that worked really well. It actually allows us to move stuff on where we want a group conversation, rather than sort of giving someone the work to do and not having that collaboration. So the next one we're going to do is not the next community call, which will be review the project board again, but the week after that, we are going to have a conversation on operators. So ideally, we do want to line up a few people to be at that meeting, such as Christian. So I'll either Luigi or I can sort of reach out and see if he's going to be available. So that is what, 3 weeks from today? Yeah, 3 weeks from today. And that's really to come up with the OKD operator catalog. So we can actually release some of the operators that are only available with a subscription on OCP to actually add some of that functionality back into OKD, things like the pipelines, things like GitOps, those operators. Just one other thing I want to mention, the work around the SNO, this for OKD, the documentation. I did see that on OKD 4.3, there was a conversation about the agent installer, which is needed for the assisted installer. So I'm wondering if that's what was causing the problem, because I couldn't get the assisted installer working on either SCOS or FCOS for OKD, versions of OKD, self-hosted assisted installer. So when we get a release of 4.13, I will have a replay of that and see if that's actually fixed some of the problems, or if there's something else going on there as well.
Hi, Brian.
Yep.
About the agent-based installer, I've been able to use it with SCOS 4.13. I have a POCTR open to show it up with SNO.
Yeah, are you the one that's been actually raising the issues? Because I've been seeing them flying past.
No, I've raised the PR. I've raised the PR about using agent-based installer with OKD.
Yeah, that's when I saw. Okay, so hopefully that will fix our SNO documentation and a process for getting that working, so we can actually put that back in the docs. And that's about it. So next week, the community meeting will be on the board review and the links in the agenda. So we'll just be going through the board to see what is outstanding and what we can move forward.
Brian, could you give the group a little bit of detail about what we talked about in terms of the website changes, just so that folks in this group are aware who might not attend those meetings?
Yeah, so what we looked at is, if you go to okd.io, the homepage has a lot of words on it, but very little useful content. There's a lot of sort of fluff and buzzwords on there. And we've come across a number of cases where we've talked to people at, say, the summit, or we've met people, and they say, I'm never sure what OKD is and whether I'm allowed to use it, whether I have to get a subscription or whether I have to get a permission or anything like that. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty around what OKD is, and I think it comes back to, it's not the upstream. It's sort of like it's classed as a sibling release to OpenShift, to OCP. So what we wanted to do is we want to simplify, reduce the amount of words, and just be very, very brief and succinct. Just to actually say what is OKD. And we had quite a good conversation around getting that getting those words right and what we actually wanted to include, and more importantly, what we didn't want to include, what we wanted to get rid of from what's on OKD.io. So I've got some wordsmithing to do. We'll release it in a branch on the OKD.io Git repo, so then people can review it and have a look at it and comment on it before it actually goes live.
Excellent.
Sounds great.
Any other thoughts or feedback on community news? Community development news? All right. One thing that I would add is the survey has been updated with tweaks, and I've gotten no feedback that anything needs to get changed. So after the US holiday next week, I'll release the survey. And so that'll be our 2023 survey. And ideally next year, we'll do it a little bit earlier, maybe in February or something like that. But at least we're getting one out this year, and then we can start that process of doing it regularly.
So Jamie, just after the conversation we had today, would a question be about whether the community want to see early features coming through? Would that be a useful question, as it to be more of a, because I know there are some people use OKD in production, and we've had comments before where, especially on the C groups V2, where we lost a little bit of stability, we had quite a bit of pushback from people that were using it in a production environment. And so I think it would be a useful question just to get a feeling from the community. How experimental do they want to be? And that might then shadow our release plan, where we have a stable and an experimental, for example, or how we want to actually do things. So a question around there might be a useful addition to the survey this year.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think something along the lines of, I'll phrase it something like, do you think OpenShift should default to new features that are just released, or something along those lines, defaulting to new features that aren't yet, I don't know how I'd phrase it. I'll come up with some wording and I'll put it in the
Wordsmithing. We'll
yeah,
get
I'll
there.
do some wordsmithing another time, but yeah, I'll put a question in and then we'll wordsmith it for sure. I think that's a great idea, and that'll help us really know what the community wants, as opposed to just people that come to the working group meetings. All right. Any other questions or thoughts about community development stuff that we can take back to the meetings? And just by attendance here, I can assume that the time change folks are happy with. We've got some old faces that are finally able to attend again, and some people who don't look as nearly worn out as so.
I am so happy we made this move, because I missing these meetings because I've been triple booked and had to pick the one that was the most necessary has been painful.
Sure. Excellent.
I did get lost last week trying to get to the community meeting. So it's the same time as this meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
'Cause I thought I tried both hours and no one was there.
Yeah, I mean, and I made it easy on everyone in the sense that now I just put it as it's 12 p.m. Eastern US.
Okay.
Because that's not going to change. So it's just, you know.
I'm so grateful that you did that. Thank you so much.
Do we know? Because I mean, we're still missing a few sort of, I would say, essential faces, sort of Christian and someone from the FCOS land. They haven't been here for a while.
Yeah.
Is that something we can resolve?
So Timothy was on PTO. I'll check and see if he's back. Christian was moving and then had some other stuff come up like right after he moved. And then of course this week Summit is happening right now. Yeah. So I don't want to extrapolate too much, but we'll see. I'll send something out and just take the temperature of folks beginning of next week once they're back. So for sure. All right, next up on the agenda, just operator next steps. I wanted to tease this out to make sure because we got another question in the channel in Slack yesterday about operators and sort of where things are going. So I want to tease this out again. So in 3 weeks, we're going to have the community development meeting focus on operators and moving forward with operators. And at the same time, ideally in next week's, in 2 weeks, the technical meeting, this meeting, I want to be able to ping Christian and anyone else from the Red Hat technical side to see, do we have all of our ducks in a row to be able to pull this off in terms of the catalog, just to be sure that we're not running ahead on one part of the equation, but we don't have the pieces in the other part of the equation. Does that sound about right for our plan moving forward to address operators?
Yep.
Excellent. All right, and that actually brings us to the end of the agenda, a little bit earlier than I thought we were going to be. Any other questions or comments or things that folks want to address in this meeting?
Yeah, Jamie?
Yeah.
One thing we might, if we're going to go along the road to upstream, then we might need to get multiple, version streams, like multiple release streams, which we don't now have.
Sure. Sort of like FCOS has. Next,
right, exactly.
stable, yeah, right.
That sort of thing, testing. Anyway, so you might just sort of add that to the long-term agenda as well.
Sure.
Or long-term discussions.
Sure. All right. Anything else? All right, cool. Well, thanks so much, folks, for your time. I will create those 3 discussion items, and then in the working group Google, and then also maybe on Slack, I'll shoot out the links to those so that folks can start adding stuff. Please do follow up in this async, because I think ultimately follow-up is going to be crucial to pulling this off. Right? All right. Thank you all, and see you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care all.
See you.